you use a red card and yellow card system here at Warrior Pendy.
Yeah.
Can you just explain briefly how that works and how why you use that model?
I think any behaviour management system is fraught with failure in one sense, that teachers will use those things inconsistently, and everyone has their own personal way of dealing with kids, and so any actual formal system, I think, can be fraught with some danger. But what we do is we have a formal warning system. So we have a system whereby if a student, for example, is using inappropriate language on a regular basis, that we give that student a warning and say, look, you need to modify your language, it's not appropriate in the classroom, so can you just choose another word, mate? And then if they do it again, it can be, if you're going to persist with that inappropriate language, you're going to get a yellow. And what a yellow is a documented warning, if you like. So the kids understand that at the end of the day, we go through all of the yellows, and if a student clocked up 7 or 8 yellows for bad language, then the staff at the end of the day we have a debrief each day where we talk through all the issues that may have occurred. And it might be, there's 4 or 5 teachers who say the language was really inappropriate all day. So we then discuss, okay, what are we going to do about that? And usually for that it would be, we need to pull that student in the next morning and have a chat about language and say what we call shortlist them and say, look, today you're only going to get 2 warnings. And if that, if you're actually not going to modify that, you may be sent home for the day. So yellows really are designed not to be used if possible. So what we hope is that teachers who have good relationships with kids won't need to use them. The kids will take the cues or learn to take the cues from teachers around warnings. So, hey mate, you're left without permission. That's not okay. So I don't want you to do that again, or it'll be a yellow. Or for no work refusal. Give kids lots of chances to try other bits of work. Sort of do some creative weaving to get them to do some work. So we don't use yellows is the goal.
Yep.
And then we have a blues, our reward system, just to not as a bribe but as an acknowledgement of good work, or it might be around positive peer support or displaying the school values. We put in a blue, which is like a lottery ticket that we draw each week, and then a red is a moving around the school permission sheet, so that and it is important because these kids will tend to head off for a drink and the next minute they're off out in another classroom visiting someone else, and so it's, we try and have a red so that we know where kids are. Some teachers choose not to use them. They're probably not used that consistently, but the yellows certainly are.
Yep. And you have a visual poster up in the staff room. Is there anywhere that the children can actually view their own yellow and red sort of thing? Or
no, we've discussed that, but we figure that really what we try and do is tell the students when they've got a yellow, so that most of them know that's it, and we try and make it that it's not seen as power over. So we try and make that yellow system so it's not one more time, mate, and there'll be another yellow, that whole, and I think it works fairly reasonably by informing kids, I warned you 3 times, mate, so that's a yellow for work refusal. So most of them know it, and we thought if we put it up publicly, it could be a bit of a public shame job. So we tend to, some kids sneak into the staff room and have a look, but mostly they know. And I think sometimes suspensions and things like that, most of the kids know when the kids are suspended or day out. So
Speaking of shame, that's a big thing in Indigenous circles of youth, especially, that I've noticed. Do you have any specific strategies that you use to try and get around that? I don't want to be better than anyone else. I'm happy to be dumb. For want of a better word.
We have experienced things such as I recall that one of our Year 12s got a job, and some of his relatives were framing him a coconut and sort of actively discouraging him from employment because it was seen as you crossing over to whitefellow, which really did surprise me actually. And then he said to me that there wasn't much point because whatever he earned would be shared and he wouldn't end up better off. So sometimes there's an element from the broader family, and sometimes you'll see kids, not really wanting to be acknowledged for, you caught me being good, how shameful. But I really haven't seen a great deal of that. I think what we try and do as a staff, when we drop a positive to a kid, is we're reasonably, reasonably subtle around that, just going, well done mate, good effort, and not a great grand thing. And yet when we have Achievement Day, and you'll see that end of the term, almost all the kids get up for an award, and none of those kids, very rarely do you get a kid who refuses to get up. And even if they're kind of going, oh whatever, they really get off on, really get something back from getting that award. And it used to be, when I began here, when there was a behavioural issue, having come from Bowden Brompton, I very firmly believed that if a kid had been abusive, that they weren't to be part of the school until someone had a talk with them about, it's okay, we all make mistakes, but this is what happened, and what we need to talk about is how it's going to be different, and can you give some commitment that next time you're angry you'll leave rather than abusing Sam, that kind of thing. Yep. And when I first began, it was seen very much as a shame job. Like, yep. That was yesterday, mate, you were shaming me, and I don't want to talk about yesterday. And it took quite a lot of, repeated meetings with all the kids and working with the kids to say, hey, it's not about shame, it's actually just about saying, how can we support you to be more successful? Yep. And then eventually, that culture around shame of being called on your behaviour, which we're trying to get kids to be responsible, it kind of improved, and almost all the kids, will see, okay, I've got to do a re-entry and be part of that re-entry, and it's not seen to me as shame. But yep. And similarly, I think a wonderful thing about Warrior Pendy is that almost all the kids have issues around literacy, and it's not seen as shame to go and work one-to-one with Pat or various people. It's actually seen as an opportunity. The kids don't go, oh, you're going to work with Pat, thickhead. Yeah. I've never seen that happen. So that's good, because they see that they're in this little family together, in this little community, and it's actually okay to go out there and work and improve your reading. So I think that's been a really good element about the school that I've noticed.
Cool. All right, one last question. Is there a difference with dealing with Indigenous children who live A, in the city, B, in rural areas, and then thirdly in, say, a really remote area?
I believe, and I've had very little to do with the APY lands and schools in remote areas, and I believe that probably, we deal with mainly urban Aboriginal kids, and we do get some kids who have connections with the lands, but mostly urban Aboriginal kids. And from what I've heard from Carlton and other schools, in sort of other cities like, Port Augusta and Whyalla and places, it seems that we share a fair commonality around kids who are urbanised. Yep. And similar around, particularly some of our kids, around disconnection from culture, so disconnection from the hierarchy of elders and aunties, certainly respect for some elders, but just disconnection in terms of Aboriginal heritage and their mob, and so therefore they're a little bit lost in what, some of them are a little bit lost in what seems to be white fella world, but they're not actually connected to Aboriginal culture either. Friends of mine who work in Ernabella certainly talk about that those kids are very, very immersed in cultural heritage, and therefore, while there might be reluctance around schoolwork or the same sort of issues there's such respect for the hierarchy that there's very very limited behavioural issues, because it's I'm going to tell Uncle Jerry about what's going on here if you don't, and then it's okay. Now that's generalising, but that's their experience, how they've reflected to me that they're immersed in culture. Our kids here are pretty lost in terms of that. Not all of them, but some of them, and that's why we do try and get as many Aboriginal elders and visitors and guest speakers in to try and get kids to connect in that way, and they certainly do enjoy that. But yeah, so I'd say, to generalise, that's my overview of it.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for that, Chris, and I hope that's a useful tool for other teachers to use.